Hello, Francis. Yasmeen Motiwalla here. I gave a speech yesterday at the San Diego Women's March and didn't get a chance to record it. So I thought I would record it here and share it with you all on the social medias. So here it is. Excerpts from America's Diary. Monday, May 14th, 1607. Dear Diary, it's so nice to have a place of our own. Sure, there's a lot of work to do to get this place fixed up to exactly how we want it. It's exciting work, though. Some slight complications, of course. It turns out that some of the former tenants are concerned with our build out plans and how it may infringe on their space. I'm confident we'll be able to work it out, though. To be honest, we're better equipped than they are in many ways. And in the long run, I'm sure they'll be grateful to share in our success. Monday, January 6th, 1941. Dear Diary, what is worth fighting for? Freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world? Freedom of every person to worship God in their own way everywhere in the world? Freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings which secure to every nation a healthy peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. Freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction in armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. That is no vision of a distant millennium. It is a definite basis for a kind of world attainable in our own time and generation. Saturday, January 21st, 2023. Dear Diary, I'm not sure how we are going to make it. We've taken on so much debt at this point. I can't imagine a day when interest isn't accruing anymore and we can begin to pay down our debt. It's been a constant struggle to decide what bills to pay and when. It's even more difficult when you're in a relationship because relationships require compromise. When we first got together, we were more on the same page. We didn't spend more than we made. And on the rare occasions we did, we went into limited debt and we paid it off right away. Back then, we always discussed what the extra spending was specifically, and we approved it together. At some point, we decided to just set a general cap on our expenses and agreed to limits that we felt comfortable with. Less arguments, less tension, less controversy. It seemed like a better approach, especially as it became clear that we didn't quite see eye to eye on all of our spending decisions. The good news was we were doing really well financially. We were flourishing. In fact, everyone else loved what we were doing so much, they were eager to invest in us, which meant we had enough cash flow to aim big. So we were leading global markets and projections were looking great. And debt spending, I suppose it just became a way of life. Of course, there were plenty of moments of reckoning along the way where it seemed our accounts would come due and we'd have to figure out a way to either cut down on our expenses or scale back our future plans. Every time, gosh, it feels like almost 100 times, we've come close to having to make very tough choices. Every time, though, reason seemed to prevail, and we just decided to up our limit. We've never addressed our spending habits. We've just kept our head above water. This time, I'm not so sure what is going to happen. Sunday, January 22nd, 2023. Dear Diary, I met up with a bunch of friends at the Women's March and decided to use this rhetorical device of diary entries to explain the debt ceiling fight in Washington and how it was connected to America's involvement and continued investment in war as a path towards peace. You see, the first entry was actually an excerpt from Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 1941 State of the Union address. He approached Congress and performing his constitutional duty, he says, to give Congress information about the State of the Union. He found it unhappily necessary to report the future and safety of our country and our democracy are overwhelmingly involved in events far beyond our borders. Remember, this is 1941. The US had not got yet into World War II. And in the same speech, he asks Congress for authority and funds to manufacture more weapons and war supplies to be turned over to the nations who had begun fighting in what would become World War II, our allies. He didn't use the term arsenal for democracy. However, that basically sums up his message. They do not need manpower, but they do need billions of dollars worth of weapons of defense. And, he says, they're not going to be able to afford them. However, we know that they need them, so we're going to call it a future investment in our own security in case we ever need to borrow them back. The fear was that if democracies tumbled, the dictator's peace would be no peace at all. Now, here's another excerpt from his speech. Certainly, this is no time for any of us to stop thinking about the social and economic problems which are the root cause of the social revolution, which is today a supreme factor in the world. For there is nothing mysterious about the foundations of a healthy and strong democracy. The basic things expected by our people of their political and economic systems are simple. They are equality of opportunity for youth and for others, jobs for those who can work, security for those who need it, the ending of special privilege for the few, the preservation of civil liberties for all, the enjoyment of the fruits of scientific progress in a wider and constantly rising standard of living. These are the simple, basic things that must never be lost sight of in the turmoil and unbelievable complexity of our modern world. The inner and abiding strength of our economic and political systems is dependent upon the degree to which they fulfill these expectations. Many subjects connected with our social economy call for immediate improvement. As examples, we should bring more citizens under the coverage of old age pensions and unemployment insurance. We should widen the opportunities for adequate medical care. We should plan a better system by which persons deserving or needing gainful employment may obtain it. I have called for personal sacrifice. I am assured of the willingness of almost all Americans to respond that call, he says. I shall recommend that a greater portion of this great defense program be paid for from taxation, more than we're paying today. No person should try or be allowed to get rich out of this program. And the principle of tax payments in accordance with ability to pay should constantly be before our eyes to guide our legislation. If the Congress maintains these principles, the voters, putting patriotism ahead of pocketbooks, will give you their applause. And that's the point where he went into the 4 freedoms worthy of investment in defending around the world. So tomorrow, members of the House of Representatives get back to work. The Senate returned today, and they're going to be dealing with, once again, the issue of the debt ceiling and raising it. This is an issue that we must each be aware of and a fight we must be engaged in. The radical right-wingers who currently hold the GOP establishment hostage have their demands of what should be cut, including funding for women's and gender-affirming healthcare. And the GOP establishment has their goals. Cuts they've been drooling over for decades, cuts to Social Security and programs of social uplift. It's important to remember that defense corporations have gotten rich off of ongoing wars. And they have lobbyists that they've employed that lobby both parties and every politician for continued war spending. The Senate and the White House, of course, are controlled by Democrats. And as we know, Democrats have historically been a big tent party. And power has always been held, though, by those with the most resources and connections. And they have their own desires of what cuts we prioritize and where we prioritize our investments. So getting back to the war spending, every time we've been told that we must invest in it, we've also been told that it would lead to peace. And that we only had 2 choices, either appeasement or more war spending. And we've been told that we're doing it for the good of people everywhere. And unfortunately, it hasn't led to the outcomes that it's promised. In fact, it's bankrupt our nation, and it's led us into spiraling debt. It's made us slaves to the military-industrial complex. Diplomacy is the only way to resolve conflict and end wars, and it's where our nation must invest. So I ask all of you to call, email, and write a letter to President Joe Biden, to our senators, and to your representative, sharing your vision of how our American budget should be spent. Thank you.